Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here with another Product Growth Leaders conversation. May, I don't know if you follow Deepak Diuleker. He's really come on with writing some good stuff. And the other week, he shared a tweet where he said that my favorite metaphor for product management is a bakery. And he actually went through a thread and actually had some really good examples about new product lines, moving from big cakes to cupcakes and stuff like that. And it got my mind thinking, right? Wouldn't this be a great topic for our conversations? I mean, we're always trying to find ways to talk to people. What do you think?
Well, Grant, I always say that a a a metaphor is like an inside joke. You have to get it to get it. And I feel like yes, metaphors are great, but I don't know. I'm not sure if it is necessarily the best way to explain product management, partly because metaphors generally do carry a lot of cultural context. And
Yep.
in order to make it a little bit more accessible, you have to kind of explain the metaphor a little bit. And also, what might be a bakery in North America might be very different in the rest of the world. So I think
Ah,
like, what is a cupcake?
that is a I feel like I should be going to DEI training right now because I didn't even think about the fact that a cupcake may be different in China than it may be here. But I think that's a
Oh,
great point that it's an inside joke, isn't it? Right? The metaphor works for people who get it and understand it. Otherwise, it's sort of sitting out there until they can see. So this week's topic is explaining product management, and I will be honest, it started with the metaphor question, and then one of our guests, Mr. Davis, came at me. Well, so did
or
Saeed, who's not here today.
I'm channeling Saeed.
So, but I wanted to broaden it out to be explaining product management. But we did put this question in the community on Monday. What is the best metaphor for explaining product management? And some really good questions coming back. We had Yusuf say it's the quarterback of the team. Jason Vincelette came and used a restaurant analogy. And Nils, I'm going to go to you, but before we get to your non-metaphor or analogy, you talked about the executive chef, and I'd like to sort of dig in on that because it's something that resonated with me. Again, maybe it's an inside joke.
Great. So thanks for asking me, Grant. And I'm happy that I was able to make some waves in that conversation. I was trying to be very polite about it, so hopefully that it didn't come off as like I was attacking or anything. But so the executive chef is actually a really interesting metaphor. Restaurants are great metaphors for lots of things related to product management, as Deepak obviously thought as well, because a bakery is a type of restaurant, in my opinion. But it also illustrates the problem with metaphors. So the executive chef is actually the boss. So the executive chef can tell the team to do something and they will do it. That's just the way it works. And the one place where that restaurant metaphor breaks down for us product managers is we're not the boss. We have to lead by influence. So that's the first thing I want. That came up in an earlier conversation today. And I wanted to just mention that. But so the idea of the restaurant as a metaphor for product as a whole is that what does a restaurant do? It creates food that people buy. Well, what's a product business? It creates a thing that people buy. So we have to be able to attract people into the restaurant. We have to build the thing that we have a menu that says, here's what you can buy here. And in the kitchen, we have to make that thing that matches what we set on the menu. And if we want to beat our competitors, other restaurants, or if we want people to come back, it has to be good quality. It has to be tasty, just like, so there's many reasons that the metaphor is great. And the final reason, which is actually my favorite reason that the metaphor is great, is that Alan Cooper, in his book, The Inmates Are Running the Asylum, which is about user experience design, he used a waiter in a restaurant as his example or metaphor for how our product should be polite. And in that he has 14 different ways that products should be polite. And they all are exhibited by how a good waiter treats you in a good restaurant and what the experience is like. And so that's one of the reasons I always love that metaphor. Also, the final reason is if you are trying to have a fine dining restaurant and you have a kitchen that has a stove with one burner, the rest are broken, the oven doesn't work. There's one person, the refrigerator's on the fritz. You can't have a fine dining restaurant no matter what your ambitions are.
Unless you're Hiri, who dreams of sushi, because he just has a bar at the train station, right?
Well, have you? I mean, yeah, no, he has an operation.
I know. I'm just kidding. I tend to use restaurants a lot too. Even in our product strategy class, I use when building a strategy and a vision. I use a local restaurant I used to be friends with the owner of as an example. And for me, it always was. I like it as a product strategy versus the actual delivery of the product. We can build a concept that sounds really good for a product, but if we can't deliver on that, and for some reason, for me, it's always lobster mac and cheese, right? Lobster mac and cheese always sounds so good when it's on the menu, and most people can't deliver on it. And that's sort of like a product execution thing. But let's give you a second right here. You also said you like to be straightforward, and you had a very quick, simple, concrete way. What's your sentence you use?
Yeah, so this is a sentence. Product managers find and validate market problems we're solving, create solutions to those problems, and take the solutions to market. And the second sentence is really the finding and validating the problems is mostly our responsibility. Building, we work with teams, and selling and go to market, we work with teams.
Boy, you just defined the product management triad there, didn't you? Product strategy, product planning, or technical product management, and product marketing. So I liked your simple sentence. It would have been a much shorter call if we just went with that.
But you can still write. The thing is, each of those is like infinitely deep. Each of those.
No, I agree. Jason Weber, so good to have you back. I loved I never thought of the detective metaphor. So talk me through the detective metaphor.
Well, back to what Nils just said, it's uncovering unmet market needs. When people talk to me, I don't have a lot of great metaphors for it, but a detective is one of them. Is you're trying to unearth clues that people don't necessarily want to give up, that people are going to hide, and not because they're trying to be, anything like that. They're not trying to be nefarious or hold things back. They just don't necessarily even know why they do things the way they do, what they want. And so we, as product people, have to uncover. We have to constantly ask why. But and so from that aspect, the whole product strategy, product definition, I like that one. Where some of the others fall out, and I think we hit this a little bit, is product managers generally are not, they're leaders, but they don't have direct reports. They don't have the ability to directly make things happen. It's all through force of our personalities. I think somebody else who's not on the call said it was herding cats when the cats are all rabid or something like that in the comments. And there's a lot of truth in that. And so when people, because that detective metaphor only goes so far, and so I generally go to examples. What are some of the best products that you've seen that have been disruptive, that solve problems that people didn't even know? The Wii is a great example. Nobody thought that they needed a video game system that didn't have great graphics and wasn't the latest and greatest, shoot 'em up thing. But the product people, and I don't actually know who at Nintendo went through and did the work on this, they opened up an entire category of users by bringing this product to market that was, your grandma could play the Wii. Nobody thought to sell a video game system to your grandma. I mean, those are the types of things that I use as examples that people latch onto. I mean, there's so many of them, the DVR, the iPod, just you can go one after another, the iPhone. So
I've been starting to try to write about product management in the real world, right? When we see things, it's like, oh, wow, that makes sense. And many of those things are when people have left a market that they thought was already penetrated and created a new market where people weren't. And I've got a book on my shelf called Grassroots Strategy by Jeff Bennett and Darren Fleming. One of my favorite books. I also know them, so it's personal. Actually, I just sent one to Saeed. And they talked about how the dog food industry thought it was totally mature and you weren't going to have any growth. Yet they went and talked to people who didn't buy dog food, made food for their dogs. And this whole new category of dog food came up, which was farmer's friend or whatever it may be. It was like real food for the dog instead of kibble for the dog. And it created a whole new category. The growth came from finding why people aren't in the market. That's product
Yeah.
management. I love going with the real thing. For detective, I often use journalist as a background people come from, but it's a similar thing, right? How do we go
Yeah.
in ask questions and learn things and figure things out? So
There's another great book that's older that I always liked, was called Blue Ocean Strategy.
yeah.
It's how do you get out of the red ocean where all the sharks are fighting each other and create a new market space. And it's got some great examples. It's a little dated now, but it's the same concept. It's essentially,
Yeah, I mean, moving from the buggy and horse to the car. That's how old. No, it's not that old. But
but getting down to the real reason that people aren't doing what, why aren't they in that market? Why aren't they doing it? Why isn't it accessible? Is there a group of consumers that you could open up to that you never had before? There's all sorts of things. And that's why I jumped to the detective analogy.
no, I love it. I really do. And we're going to go from one thing I had never thought of, a detective analogy, to another, a fan. May, you used a fan as the analogy for the impact of product management. Talk to me about product management and fans.
So I think metaphors have a place, and generally speaking, the bigger the metaphor, the easier it is to find holes in it. But I like to think about more how can we create effective product managers, especially when we're designing our organizations. So let's say a product manager is a fan, right? And a fan blows in a certain direction and it's hot. So like you gather around the fan where it's cooler and it makes it easier for you to work. You start working in the right direction. But what's really important is where you put the fan in the first place and the direction that that fan is pointed towards, right?
Okay.
So that's about like how do you it's about creating a right corporate strategy to inform your product strategy and to give that fan, your product manager, the right guidance to select the right direction. So maybe it's a smart fan and it like adapts the direction based on like what's needed. Maybe you could put the fan on a Roomba so it can like change positions according to the data that's being collected on the sensors. But it's about really informing your position and direction to build towards. But also, like, that's what product managers do. You reduce the overall friction and the
Mhm.
heat between the teams so people can actually do the work. Is the fan actually doing much work? No, not really. Like you're not actually building anything, but you are definitely there to provide a direction. Like, people can still build without you.
Yeah.
It's just like it doesn't set a direction. It doesn't tell people this is the optimal place to build.
And all of a sudden, I'm thinking about building on that. It's like, if you think about a fan, if you're working with the fan, it actually helps propel you and you get benefit from it. If you're working against the fan, it slows you down and you have more friction. I even like the analogies you used for the manual hand fanning fan. Your hand holding the team too much. The standing
Well,
fan
no,
with a
no, not the
broken.
hand-holding team, but like think of it. If you are the one holding the fan, you're
Yep.
not the one working on the thing. It's probably a leader holding the fan, like making it do the
Yeah.
work, and you're not doing the work that you need to do, which is like putting the fan in the right place and then freeing yourself up to go do the actual like other work that you need to do.
Okay.
So, because it's about like how much effort you need to put in. Is that fan stuck in one direction and blowing that one direction, and like you have to actually go in again manually turn it around to do things? Or is it like a rotating fan that just like blows everywhere but isn't really terribly effective because you're not focused? Is it like a nice sturdy box fan that does exactly what you want, blows in the right direction at like a good amount of speed? Or is it a jet engine that just like is way too powerful and no one can work with them?
Did
Blows
you
everyone
have
away.
this? Did you have this fan analogy before the question, or did
No,
this
I
sort of?
came up with it.
Okay, because I wanted to know the origin story. Now I know the origin story. Ari, you have a comment?
Yeah, I know I didn't comment or vote on the original topic, but this is something I always have a lot of trouble with. In fact, when I interview PMs, one question I often ask is, how do you describe product management to your grandma? Because I have never been able to do that well. Every time I talk to her, she asks the same question. I explain it slightly differently and it doesn't stick. And I definitely agree with May that there's a ton of inside jokes that make a description or a metaphor work or not work. The one way I think about it, and I would define it, I guess the simplest way I can think about it is a product manager is someone who cares deeply about understanding problems and navigating to value in a world of complexity. And the other thing I'd say with to May's fan point, I love that analogy, and I think I PMs, yeah, we don't really do a lot, but we also do a lot of intangibles. Where like, yes, we don't like design the final product. We don't code up the final product, but we are the ones that protect the process and make sure our team can build the right thing in the right way. And the fan is pointing where it should, blowing at the right speed. It's, you know, hitting the people that we need it to, and it's the right temperature. And yeah.
Yeah, if I'm going to go with, you know, sort of how do you explain, I always say product management is about, you know, maximizing the value we create for the market and for the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
We help make those decisions and we empower the organization to go get it. Danny is not here, but she did come up with maybe the mic drop answer. She said product management is like herding cats, except for all the cats are feral and hostile. Somebody referenced it earlier. I want to send people who aren't watching this or haven't been in the community to the community, because Clay Nichols put a great link in for an EDS commercial on herding cats, which I hadn't seen before, but like, wow, pure gold, as Danny said. Jason, you said best answer. So I wanted to call that out. Clint, you came up with captain of the ship. Talk to me about the leadership you're looking at there for the captain.
Yeah, so I mean, perfect example. I'm sure you guys all saw over, I think it was the last 3 or 4 days, there was a cruise ship that got stranded, and
in Greenland, yeah.
Were extremely less than enthralled about their $25,000 payment that they made to go on this cruise ship, and they ended up getting stranded and have to get pulled off. So I thought that was a good example of what went completely awry. But I look at it from a product management perspective. We really are the captains of the ship, right? We need to define where we're going, how we're getting there. We talked about problem solving, right? So a lot of times you've seen when there's bad weather out there, the captain has to make a pretty significant decision about what do they do. And a lot of times in a storm or in a hurricane, they were supposed to go to a number of different ports, and they have to reroute, and they can't go to those ports. So they not only have a problem that they have to solve with regards to safety for their passengers, but you've got a lot of pissed off passengers that spend a lot of money. So you have to figure out how do you basically provide them with some type of process, or, you know, refund or credit on future sales that gets them happy, right? So it can go from something that goes terribly wrong, where they're never going to go on that cruise ship again, or they're never going to buy your product again, versus you've developed something based on needs and really understanding your customer and defining the requirements to where it's a positive experience, and they're going to rebuy and rebuy and rebuy. So, and you've got a lot of different players, right? You've got the engine room, you've got the stewards, you've got the staff. To me, a ship is an amazing kind of centralized process unto itself. I mean, there's like typically almost as many crew members as there are passengers on a ship. So keeping that thing all running and happy is just, to me, would be like the ultimate program management type of story.
God, I've got so many ways I want to go with this one. One is sort of, I'm going to sort of do a nod back to Nils and the customer. I mean, one of the reasons I like the restaurant is it brings the customer experience play into. It's not just the product itself, it's your whole experience you have with it. And the cruise ship is definitely there. The second is, I was reading When by Daniel Pink, which is about like science about when you should be doing stuff. And what he has, or somebody has hypothesized, is that the captain of the Lusitania, the reason why that he made decisions that led to them getting sunk was purely because it was the afternoon and not the morning, and his decision making was bad because research shows it's there. And then how does decision making impact us? And I'm going way off stream with that. The third and final one, which I do want to dig into, is, and I'll come back to, because I want Aimme to give a chance before I sort of divert us, but I want everybody thinking about, we've talked about already, captain is the captain, people report up to the captain, right? The executive chef, like Nils talked about it. how can we portray product management in this leader role when we really don't have the accountability or at least the control over the staff? So think about that. I'm going to go to Aimme. Aimme, welcome. You've been listening to a whole bunch of people talk about how they try to explain product management. Has anything resonated? Do you have something you use?
I do, but like, I apologize. I wasn't on I haven't been pondering this the whole week. I don't know where you guys are all writing on the site. I just joined. But the way I usually describe it is that, well, first of all, in tech, I find most people are players of chess, but I always encourage them to think of the game Go, which is actually, I think, more representative of chess, of product management, in the sense that, one, there are different rules based on country, even though most of a certain region plays the game, and it is less procedural, and inevitably, no matter what product group I've been a part of, there is an emergency, either employee, like attrition of a major client, or there's a new legislation, or there's competitive intelligence, or there's a data integration that needs to be done ASAP due to a sales deal. And I think that approaching it just procedurally as a project manager is where products fail, and that it really needs to be kind of looking at the whole board and recognizing that you have to keep all of the different kind of a 360-degree view, keep them all active and monitor and recognize a move here does influence kind of the continent or like the blob on the other side of the board. It's not a great metaphor, guys. Sorry.
No, I like it. I haven't played Go in a long time. I'm gonna have to go back and do it again. I mean, I've heard people use. I've leaned into Annie Dukes in using poker as an example as well, right? Because we're making decisions with incomplete information. But I'm gonna have to go check out Go and May, you were nodding your head and you sort of resonated.
Oh yeah, my brother is really into Go. He teaches Go. So yeah, no, in Go, a single move changes the whole game across the board. I think that's a fantastic analogy. Anyone who plays Go understands it. Like, that's why it was such a big deal when there was an AI who can like consistently beat Go players. Yeah, no, that's a fantastic analogy.
Well, Aimme, thank you for coming in strong for your first one, and don't worry,
Sorry for not reading. I don't know where that is, so if someone could show me afterwards, that would be great.
Yeah, we'll get a link in the chat. You can see where it did. We just do it in the community, and on Monday it goes up. So, but awesome. I want to go back to that question, and I'm going to come back to you, Nils, because you sort of referenced it with your executive chef example. How Steve likes to use the orchestra conductor example, and the reality is the orchestra conductor still is the leader who's responsible for the whole thing, where often product management is not. You've seen people shy away from CEO of because of this. How do we properly get people to understand this sort of influencing other people who don't report to you aspect of it?
Yeah, I just wrote that exact question in my notes. What is a good metaphor for a leader without responsibility? And nothing is leaping to mind at the moment. And hopefully I'll think of something. But yeah, all the leaders that we know of that we sort of, and this actually probably aligns with the fact that there's no such thing as a famous product manager. The leaders that we know of are actual bosses, generally. Steve Jobs, right? He was a great product manager and a thinker and a leader, but he was also the boss.
Yeah.
And even Elon, however you feel about him, he's the boss. He makes the decisions and
good or bad.
Yeah. Well, right. And we're seeing some of the problems that can arise, right? if your product visionary is also kind of an idiot in some ways. But the rockets still take off apparently. So whatever. I don't exactly know. I mean, I think there are examples of people who become leaders, and what often happens is that if they're good at leading, they become the boss. And actually, we experience that as product managers, right? We say that we don't have authority, but the reality is if I ask my team to do something, they will do it a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Not always. You know, I can't hire and fire them, but oftentimes they look to me as for the answer, or they look to, or they take what I say in the same way they would take what a boss would say
Uh,
as a directive that they must do.
there's got to be like Daniel Pink or Adam Grant has probably had to have written something on this type of stuff. I mean, the first thing I thought about is like even wartime type stuff. You see people who are not the technical leader in times of stress step in and be able to bring people together.
Right.
I'm reading Adam Grant Give and Take right now, and it seems like, you know, the goodwill you build as a giver maybe is something that helps you get to the place where you need to be to do this. Anybody else have thoughts on this?
I think just on the point of we're not always accountable. It's, I think, a matter of influencing, right? You have to, as a product manager, you have to have the ability to influence and to collaborate across multiple functional disciplines, right? I mean, people always ask me, what's your special sauce? And that, to me, that's my special sauce. I can talk in depth about production operations, supply chain, procurement, engineering. I think that's the value that you bring as a strong product manager, is that you're not simply focused on developing a product, but you understand everything that goes into that. They understand that you have to work with service if it's a hardware-based product to ensure that if the product breaks down, it can be fixed and not take your customer down. So that influencing, collaborating is such a huge part of our core DNA and makeup that makes us successful, and is something that really is something that's not taught enough, I think, relative to our skill sets that we're, you know, that people look to us to bring to the table.
And I think you start getting into empathy, right, and compassion, and understanding what those other functions are going through and how you can help them. It's tough. Jason, any thoughts?
I don't think I have any additional thoughts that I haven't shared. I mean, we've had some fun in the chats going back and forth about things about, you know, lobster mac and cheese and the one that we've been that's most recent is that most product managers are not formal leaders. I mean, even me, who has a leadership role in my company, software development doesn't report to me. So influence, and I think it was Nils' comment, you know, you ask people and they just do it. That's because as a product manager, you have to build up that respect, the influence. I mean, I had people who were, you know, they thought I had control over their career where I had none. But I mean, I guess that's power in a way, but you need to build that up in order to be able to effectively do your job. And I know I'm taking us down in a completely different path here, but it is something that is so important that people wanting to get in the product management profession have to understand is you have a lot of responsibility lumped on you. You have a lot of people looking at you and so much stress involved with that, but yet your ability to accomplish what you want to is about force of personality more than anything else. You need to be charismatic. And we talked about leaders, you know, who are, you know, product leaders that moved up into leadership roles. They had a force of personality. No matter what you think of some of those people, they do that. And a lot of the success, I dropped the iPod before, you know, Steve Jobs has a huge amount of responsibility for the success of that because of his force of personality and his strategic vision and the ability to understand the market. And so he's a really good example of a product leader. So
yeah, but yet he was still the CEO, so everybody eventually reported up to him so he could get stuff done.
Well, he also founded the company. So I mean, even though he was fired once and rehired again, he founded the company. So and you look at that, and even the founder of Microsoft, whose name completely escapes me at the moment, Bill Gates, he wasn't a product guy, but he understood the value of the operating system much more than the people at IBM. And he had a vision and a strategy, and it paid off pretty well for him.
No,
so.
I get it. May, you want to say something?
Argue against that.
Okay.
So at a certain point, this works. However, a cult of personality is not scalable, nor is it reliable. And the reason for that is because, like, if you have to independently build your own credibility every single time you have a new person join the company, that is not going to work out, because and it really limits the like who you can hire. If you need a subject matter expert in your market for that specific case, it's in that field, say you're working with actuaries, right? Like, it's really hard to find a charismatic actuary who understands the technical side of things and is able to like build a team and like influence without power. And I think this is where building that team culture really comes into play. If you set the expectation that here are the roles and responsibilities and here's how we work together, and that is a system in which you work, and that's a system in which how you build all of the connecting pieces together, that has a lot more staying power and allows you to have a lot more freedom in terms of who you hire without needing to reestablish like that sense of how you work together every single time. And I think it's really important to think about, like, yes, you are setting the stage with your power, your presence now, but how do you make it so and scale it so that other people can piggyback off your work, especially when you are trying to grow your team. Because it doesn't make sense to start from scratch every single time you introduce a person, right? So it's about intentionally creating systems that allow you to scale that culture, that cultural expectation of this is how we work together. And yeah, it takes a lot of social capital, but it's not necessarily like something that we independently have to do over and over again. And it's not something we should want for our career.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's you're pushing that route, that rope uphill, or whatever analogy you want to use
Yeah.
for that. I think this is, sorry, Grant, I'm just jumping in, but this is why so many companies are successful with individual products, but have a lot of trouble scaling up, because just the individual one, and we've discussed it, and this is the whole reason that Grant's business exists. There's a lot of companies out there that are not good at product management. And so they have to start somewhere. And you fortunately have had the privilege of working for companies that have been able to, to work to scale it, to have a position like somebody like you there. A lot of companies are not at that point in their maturity of the product management cycle. So, okay, Grant, I'll stop now.
I learned as much from the big companies that did it poorly as I did the ones who did it well. Because I think part of where I've established myself was that I was the guy who came in and did what I consider good product management, or Steve would consider good product management. I talked to customers, right? And too often the hubris we have is once we figure the market out, oh, I know it, I know everything. And the markets change and needs change and problems change if you don't keep doing that. I think for me, it is, as May said in there, failure is a good teacher. And I've had my failures and I've had my successes, and I've learned as much from those as I have from any system I got from one of those big companies. I can still look back and I've learned and taken the best from some of those places. But as you guys were talking, the one thing came to mind. Maybe the best analogy is a captain of a sports team, right? Your job is to get the team working together, coming together, build a culture among the players, but none of them report to you. You're doing it through influence and through leadership. So I'm going to throw that out there, and we're going to move to the poll. And since Steve is not here, I'm going to have to pin myself so people who can't see it can see it. And the question we asked, and this is sort of the pivot of it, is what is the best approach to explain product management? Using metaphors, describe in a very simple, concrete way, show them your actions and explain what it is. Too late, product management is lost. And that was for a former panelist who told me that one time. And then it depends. And you see me, I voted for using metaphors, and that was a mistake. I don't know what I was going to vote for, but I was trying to copy it so I could share it in LinkedIn, and it voted for me. So I was the first vote in this time. But since nobody else who voted for metaphors is there, I'll sort of do my take on it. And it's sometimes metaphors is the best way to cut across people who don't have understanding. If they haven't worked within our business, a metaphor can often be a way to help people understand. Deepak, who sort of was the inspiration for this, did that with his bakery metaphor, whether it's a restaurant metaphor or captain of the ship, fan, whatever it may be. You know, sometimes metaphors are help people see things they don't understand. So I'll do it for that. We got a couple. Clint, do I see you there on describe it in a very simple, concrete way?
Yeah, that was mine. I mean, people, ask me all the time what it is. So, I try to define it as that, we develop value-added solutions based on customer requirements and working with a collaborative group of folks to deliver, execute, and then manage a product line or a solution. Doesn't have to be. I'm a hardware guy, so I mean, I always explain it more in a hardware perspective.
Which sometimes is easier than a software perspective.
I think people are more geared these days towards software. I mean, if you look at the companies that are up and all the jobs that are coming up, in the vast majority are software based versus hardware based. I mean,
I agree with that, but I think people struggle with the intangibility of software and the business model, where, it's at least when managing a business and having cost of goods sold and a bill of materials and the type of stuff for hardware, to me, sometimes can be more tangible when you're talking about managing a business. Yeah. It's easy to talk about variable costs in a hardware thing, not in as much as in software, which helps with the business side.
Software is free.
Yeah. May, show them your actions, explain what it is, and I'll go to Ari too for that one.
It's really hard to not click the product management is lost button.
Yeah.
I'm glad we did.
I almost clicked that too.
So if we had ranked choice voting, that actually may have won.
No, it would always be number 2 because we can't give up. We cannot give up. We must fight.
It feels lost, but maybe it isn't yet lost.
I think it depends on the level you're explaining it, right? Like if you're explaining it to grandma, you probably want it simple. You probably want it, like, you can use a metaphor. It doesn't really matter. But if you want your metaphor you want to explain it to someone who actually needs to understand, like if you're explaining it to your CEO or your CFO, what it is that your team does, I don't think it's enough to use a metaphor. I don't think it's enough to explain it in a simple manner. I think it's important to talk about your outcomes, which is complex, and also to talk about what the team actually does to achieve those outcomes. And that, like, it's so here's one of the issues that I personally have with a lot of the content that's out there, is that what people tend to consume are short articles. They're posts on LinkedIn, they're maybe Twitter threads, but it's easy to consume. It's short, and you don't get the amount of depth needed to truly understand what it is that the people are saying. It like feeds your ego a little bit, and you're like, yes, this is a great point, and 5 minutes later you have no idea what you read. Right? It's that process of learning and understanding deeper that really starts to connect the dots together. And I think it's a part of how humans learn. It's not even just like us as product managers, is how do we help the rest of the organization learn what it is that we do and how it is that we can help them. So like for me, I really struggle with the idea of a simple explanation, partly because I don't know if there's value in it, except to maybe like ask people to stop asking you questions. Like it's like, yeah, okay, that's cool, and then you walk away. But like that doesn't lead to a deeper discussion.
Yeah, let me put my product management hat on. Maybe the problem is we didn't have a marketer persona chosen for this, right? If you're explaining it to your grandma, like Ari, simple metaphor may be the right thing. When you're explaining it to people in your company who don't understand what you do or should be doing, I easily could see that, show them the actions. So you walk them through the process and help them figure that type of stuff out. I like that a lot. And I think we have to think about who we're explaining it to. And in some cases, simple makes sense. In some cases, you need to show them. So I like that, May.
And piggybacking on what May was saying, just that it's so deep, is one thing that makes it really hard to explain as well. Is it's almost like product management done best is a mindset. It's not a specific set of things you do or activities that need to happen. It's it's a way of thinking. It's a way of approaching problems in a certain way and approaching collaboration and value in a certain way. And you can't, no matter what metaphor, no matter what series of steps, someone's either just going to take the steps and proceduralize them and turn them into a template that you don't think about, or going to totally miss the forest for the trees because the idea of the mind or the metaphor is so broad.
I love that quote, product management done best as a mindset. And I want to keep that separate from product sense and that type of stuff that people try to push. But I think it is a practice. But I like the mindset. Thank you, Ari. That's really good. Jason, you were other, it depends, but it felt like it was partly describe it simply in a concrete way, the way you put it in the notes.
Yeah, it kind of was. I was torn a little bit because I use the examples, but I can do it in just a couple of sentences, but then it gets very nuanced, and that's the difficult thing, because when you do it in a couple of sentences, people get a general idea. Yeah, I define, you define what needs to be built, and you ensure that it gets built, and you ensure that it can go to market properly. Okay, those are the three things. There's a lot behind those three statements that that needs to be done, and that's where I start throwing to examples. So it's difficult is kind of the way I put it. And usually whenever I have a conversation with somebody, it always devolves into one area, whatever they're interested in. I had a conversation with a guy earlier this week, and he wanted to know how, since I'm a software guy also, when you have a ton of technical debt, how you deal with that. And we kind of delved into that as a product leader, what you would do. And it's just interesting because really depending on where the people come from is where you end up diving. And like I said, examples are just sort of my go-to anyway. I think people can glom onto them, and they tend to cross cultural boundaries pretty well as well. The guy I was talking to was actually from Australia, so.
Well, and I'm thinking about, I think it's your example, but sometimes and this is getting into show them with an example. Weren't you the one that talked about having a computer device that was like at a construction site, and if you didn't bring the people out to see that, if the dirt and all the environmental stuff that were impacting that, was that Rick?
Oh, that was a while ago. Well, it could have been Rick because he and I worked together for a while, and we both were on the same project. But one of the things that we used to do is whenever this is my previous employer, is whenever we had somebody go on site with a customer, we'd bring the entire team in and do a show and tell. We had a weekly Friday meeting, and we'd have them coming in and doing a show and tell. And it really helped because we were doing vibration and condition monitoring, and it was going on the side of an asphalt drum. And the tech that went out there brought back pictures to show about it. And he had his phone out with the current temperature on it. And he said, well, next to the drum, it's actually about 40 degrees warmer there. You have to understand that this thing is, the asphalt's rotating in the drum and it's getting vibrated constantly. So you have to design for those sort of realities. If you go and you put something on there that you designed that sits on your desk, it's not going to work in that environment. And like I said, it could have been Rick, it could have been me, because we were both there at the same time. So
I like it. And I think that's part of the showing them in the real world, right? Give those examples where people can, oh, wow, I didn't think about that, right? Understanding all the stuff.
Showing them how it's used usually opens eyes. So
Amy put into the chat, does this group advocate and use RACI charts? Thinking a metaphor coupled with a RACI chart can clarify things for a specific organization. I like the idea of that context. Ari?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'd be interested, Amy, to hear what you mean about clarifying those things, what things for a specific organization, but it's an interesting idea. I would say I use RACI charts somewhat frequently, but my main use is to kind of create separate use cases or personas for my stakeholders. So I can, as I'm determining like, hey, who needs to be communicated to and when, I just kind of set up a RACI. I'm like, okay, if this event happens or this thing happens, I know immediately who I need to talk to, what level of information I need to give, what method of communication I have to do. And I can see that concept applying to broader clarification, but I haven't thought about it that way before. So I'm definitely interested here.
I like racy. I've often recently been trying to push a different analogy or metaphor for racy. It's the God, what was that Nanny McPhee movie with Emma Thompson? And I feel like racy is like Nanny McPhee, because Nanny McPhee, for those who haven't seen it, it's a kids sort of a kids movie, but I liked it. And the kids, she's ready to leave, and the kid's like, no, we don't want you to leave. And she goes, when you don't want me but you need me, I'll be there. When you don't need me but want me, I'm gone. And for me, that's racy, right? Teams don't want it but need it is when you should be doing the racy to get things aligned. And then when the teams no longer need it because they're collaborating well, then it can go away and you don't need it. You can let the actual culture happen. May, did you like that analogy?
Yes, I loved it because I think that racy is a fantastic tool to have a conversation, because it is the reason why you pull out the racy is because things aren't working. Things are not smooth. People aren't doing their work or what they perceive to be other people's work. So you pull it out and you have a conversation about, like, okay, this is the work that needs to be done. Let's just like figure out who does it. And you have all those arguments about this is not my job. And at the end of the day, you have something that's like kind of, a thing that you agree on, maybe, sort of, kind of, not really.
Yeah.
And then people go and do things, and over time you improve. But like, if you use a racy as a permanent tool, then it just becomes process. And people just cannot be creative when there is process.
Yeah. So I'll leave it at that. I do want to get to oops, I didn't move my slide. One quick question I want to go through. When explaining product management, what is the most important thing to cover, right? If we're going to explain it, if you only could get one point across, what point would you want to get across, Clint?
What it is.
Go big.
I think that's the key thing, really defining what it is. I mean, it's we've talked a number of different times over a couple of weeks on what it is, and today was a great, I think a great session to kind of get everybody's mindset around that. But and it's really important. What are we as a product manager / leader accountable for, responsible for delivering to the organization?
Okay. Clint goes big and says the most important thing is just what it is. Jason.
Well, that's hard to follow. I guess if I pick on something, it would be, I would go with talk about creating a strategy that's actually executable by your company.
Okay.
I've been in the middle of products and strategies that sound great and probably would solve customer problems, but the company has no ability to execute on it. And so that's why I add that caveat in there is I want to solve the next big thing, but I want to do it that my company can do it. So.
No, I love that. It's not just about visions and strategies. It's about feasibility and viability to do it. I got it. Ari.
Yeah, I would say most important thing to emphasize is that you have to solve problems and make sure they are actually solved. You go about solving problems and make sure they actually are solved. Because too often, one of the contexts there is too often you see products being built that don't actually solve problems, or building things and then not measuring the outcome or the impact of that after it's built. So thinking about problems, building solutions that actually solve those problems.
No,
And
I like
defining the problem is also critical, right?
Yes.
I mean, there's so many, you have to take a look at, you've got so many problems. How do you prioritize and how do you make sure you're resolving the right problem? Because you can fix a problem, but it's a problem that nobody cares about. So making sure that it's the right problem is also a critical element.
So Clint is now in with what product management is and defining the problem. May.
So my go-to very short definition of product management is we find out what is the most important thing we could possibly be doing with what we have today.
Mhm.
So it's really about customer outcomes, right? It's like making decisions to drive customer outcomes and therefore business outcomes. And I think it's important to bring it back to like the purpose we are here is to make decisions. The purpose we are here is to like make sure we're making the right decisions or make sure decisions get made. Like even if we're not the ones making decisions, making sure
Mhm.
decisions get made. And how do we do that? We go look at data.
Yeah.
We, you know, like that's we, so
You-
basically
yeah.
outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to build on that. Just actually use my thesaurus and come up with the word I used instead of outcome. I think outcome is overused and not understood. Maybe it rhymes. It's close enough to outputs and outcomes that it makes sense to change. To me, it's all about value. It's about product management is a value creation role, right? Our job is to identify those problems, as Ari and Clint talk about, to solve. Make sure that we are able to solve them, as Jason talked about. And if we do that right, we create value, right? That's what Drucker talked about. That's what Drucker taught. We create value for our company, right? As Alex Osterwald would say, when we create value for a company, we do it through a business model. We create value for the customer or the market through a value proposition. And that's sort of, for me, I want to lead in, and it's all about value creation. Ari, you have got your hand raised?
Yeah, no, you said the word outcome is overplayed. I agree. I use it all the time, but I agree. And I think in some ways it's one of those inside jokes that if you don't get it, you don't get it. And it
Yeah.
can mean a lot of different things. My question is the word value also overplayed and a little bit of an inside joke? I also use it all the time. I use it all the time, but I don't know if it makes a lot of sense for people that don't get the joke.
I use value add more than value to try to show that it's something that's you can provide as differentiation.
Yeah. I'm all open for a different word from outcome or value. As many of you guys know, I'm a Druckerite or Drucker head. Is that what the right thing is? I'm a parrot head for a Jimmy Buffett, so I'm a Drucker head for Peter Drucker. Whatever it is, he defines it as creation of value, right? And so I tend to lean back to that.
Oh, that was a legitimate. That was not me challenging you. That was a real,
no, I know. I'm open. I'm open to
like.
I'm open
I
to different
agree.
words. Aimme, before we move to the wrap up, any thoughts on this?
Well, I guess what I would say is I kind of try to say, well, first of all, I'm in the outcome camp, but I would always do kind of the qualification that the definition is fluid and based on context. So I've been a regular product manager, and I've also been an AI machine learning product manager. And that really got me to that place, because when you're a regular product manager, there's like the product owner, there's Scrum, and there's you in engineering. When you are in the AI machine learning space, there is the data engineer, there's the software engineer, there's the data scientist, and there's the PO. And sometimes you really just don't want the data scientist cleaning their own data. So long story short, I'll just state that it is very context specific, and that you have to have a pretty straightforward discussion, because sometimes all of the people in the room know Python, but you really only for the task at hand, given the way their job in that organization, you only want them doing certain tasks, example. And that's just taking one skill out of a multitude that exists in software companies. And so I always say that you have to decide and do context in order to figure out who's going to own it, what the OKRs and the KPIs in order to back into outcome, and then just doing an empty kind of template without recognizing, well, hey, our data engineers don't know Python, we have to work around them. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And actually, in May, I'm looking at your quote, your post in the chat.
Okay, well, thank you, May.
It is about context, and maybe that's the most important thing for product management for us to share. Is it's about context. It's about knowing the context of the situation. It's about providing the right context for the situation, because that's what our job is context.
You know what we say? It depends.
It depends. I know. All right, we're gonna do a quick sort of key takeaways for this to wrap it up. Jason, your key takeaways from this conversation or learnings.
I'm jealous of May having worked at these organizations that have really good product management skills.
I don't know about that.
We built it.
Maybe not, or at least her fantasy of them. One of the two. Yeah.
Build it together.
Yeah. Clint.
I've learned a couple different ways to tell people about how we manage, how we define product management. So we've got chef, we've got we've got fan, we've got all sorts of new and interesting ways to communicate the value that we bring.
Clint's getting to describing, and the chef has a fan in the Aimme.
I thought my fan on the Roomba was fine.
Oh, I would just say I'm thrilled and honored and delighted to attend my first meeting, and you guys were all wonderful. I loved this dialogue.
We haven't scared her away. That's good to hear. Ari.
Tell you what, it may not really be possible to explain product management in a 1 to 2 sentences.
Gosh, I think you might be right. My friend May.
It's not lost, but it's just hard to describe.
It depends.
It depends. That's exactly how you describe it.
Who's your audience? Who's your audience? When you're describing it, think about how deep do you need to go.
Yeah,
I agree. My biggest takeaway is: are there any other professions that are having conversations about how do we describe what we do, right? Or is that just a product management thing? See, FP&A people don't have to describe what they do. Accountants don't have to describe what they do. Engineers don't. Actuaries, okay, maybe they do. Yeah. But then they're going to give you a formula that we don't understand anyway. But
maybe it's they can't explain it.
Yeah, true. Consultants would be a good one. But I feel like, maybe this is part of the maturity of product management. Once we can figure out how to explain to other people what it is, that'll give us to a better place. So, gosh, what a great conversation. Aimme, thank you for coming in and bringing your insights. We hope we see you on future ones. Jason, Clint, Ari, May, always got a pleasure to talk with people, to learn and gain new perspectives. Hopefully each of you have as well. Couple things. We're going to move to every other week now. So instead of next week, it's going to be in 2 weeks. And, this might be interesting to you, Aimme, since you have an AI machine learning background. We did an AI one, sort of what's the AI impact on product management, about 6 months ago, right when ChatGPT came out. This is going to be a little more specific about what are the use cases in product management? How are you seeing people use AI in large language models, whatever you want to do it? And that's going to be where it is. We've had a lot of people asking us about how people are best using AI. We thought maybe we'd bring it to the group and happen there. So it's not a Monday, like in a couple days, but in the second Monday, whatever, we'll do that. And we'll do that. So, and we do this every week. Aimme, this is in the community. We'll put the question. You'll get notification. It'll be there. What?
You do this every other week.
Every other week. Sorry, we do this every other week. My talk track is still in my head. We're going to be doing this every other week. The question goes in on Monday, poll goes in on Wednesday, in these wonderful conversations on Friday. So, guys, thank you so much for an amazing conversation. Aimme, so glad to have you enjoy yourself here, and we'll talk to you guys in a couple weeks. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.
Good weekend. Thanks, guys.